هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله ورسول الله معلمنا هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله.
Let's begin. Many are the stories of great men such as Moses alayhi salam, Solomon, Abraham, and Jesus, may Allah bless them all. When we read their stories, we admire and relish their strength of faith. We marvel at their devotion and dedication to Allah, and we envy their sacrifice and their valor. When we read the stories of these great men, we triumph at their victories and their rewards. And many of us ponder, how did these great men manage to remain so firm? How did they manage to endure the things that they've endured and still remain strong and firm in their faith? The reality is that these men were not alone. Behind each and every one of these men, there stood a motivating force of support and encouragement, a motivating force of understanding and help, a motivating force which engulfed and stayed with them till the very end. And that motivating force took the form of a woman. We begin with one of the greatest and most popular men of all times, Moses alayhi salam. Moses is mentioned more than any other prophet in the Quran. We read of him and we can't help but to marvel at his perseverance. The perseverance displayed by Moses may have been a behavior that he learnt from the woman who stood behind him from birth, the woman who raised and molded him. And that woman was the wife of Pharaoh, whose name was Asiyah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam once said, "Many amongst men attain perfection, but amongst women none attain perfection except four." And he mentioned Asiyah, the wife of Pharaoh, as being one of those four. Asiyah, she found Moses as a baby floating upon the Nile River. She rescued and gathered him into her arms, and she took him to her husband. Allah tells us that when she presented the baby to her husband, she said, in the interpretation of the meaning, "He will be a comfort to the eye for me, so kill him not, O Pharaoh, for perhaps he may be a benefit to us. We may adopt him as a son." Pharaoh had no son to share the throne with after him. Plus, Moses was a beautiful baby to look at. So thus Asiyah, she adopted Moses, and she raised him as her own. Later in life, when Moses announced his prophethood, few people believed in him. Many because of the fear they had for Pharaoh. One of the few people who did believe in his prophethood was Asiyah, the woman who raised him. Asiyah, she recognized the truth of Moses' message, and she became a Muslim despite being married to the most evil of men. Her husband, who was the Pharaoh of Egypt, He claimed to be Allah himself, and he demanded that everyone should worship him. Asiyah rejected this, and she chose instead to worship the one true God, the God of Moses, alayhi salam. Allah mentions Pharaoh's response to his wife in the Quran. Says Allah in the interpretation of the meaning, Pharaoh said, "Believe you in he before I give you permission? Surely this must be your leader who has taught you magic. Rest assured, I will cut off your hands and feet on opposite sides, and I will have you crucified on the trunks of trees. So shall you know for certain which of us can give the most severe and lasting punishment." That is what her husband said to her. That was what Pharaoh said to her because she refused to worship him. So thus, Asiyah, she came to be tortured and abused tremendously by her evil husband. Yet she remained firm in her faith, and never did she denounce her belief in the one true God, Allah. Once her husband had tied her down to the ground, and he positioned a large rock above her. He then ordered her to renounce the God she paid tribute to instead of he. Asiyah, she looked up towards the heavens, and ignoring her pain, she closed her eyes and she prayed to Allah, the God of all creation. Allah answered her prayer, and he took her soul right before the rock was sent crashing down upon her. Such was the faith and perseverance of the woman who stood behind Moses. Such was her greatness of faith that Allah made her the perfect example to all who believe in him. Says Allah in the interpretation of the meaning, Allah set forth an example to those who believe, the wife of Pharaoh. Behold, she said, "O my Lord, build for me in nearness to you a mansion in the garden, and save me from Pharaoh and his doings, and from those who do wrong." Such was the story of Asiyah, a great woman of perfection, who stood behind the great man known as Moses, alayhi salam.
هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله ورسول الله معلمنا هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله